There was my husband, smiling beside a pregnant woman, his hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The timestamp in the corner of the photo showed last Tuesday, the same day he told me. He was working late. My neighbor Marcus stood awkwardly in my doorway, his eyes full of pity as he watched 15 years of marriage crumble in my trembling hands. If this story makes your heart race, please like, follow, and share it with someone who needs to understand that sometimes the truth arrives uninvited on your doorstep. And trust me, you'll want to know how this ends. My name is Tasha Williams, 38, mother of 2 beautiful children, Zoe, 14, and Eli, 10 and until 3 days ago, wife to James, my college sweetheart and partner of nearly 2 decades. We lived in a renovated Victorian and the kind of neighborhood where people bring you casseroles when someone dies and collect your mail when you're on vacation. The kind of place where everyone knows your business, or at least thinks they do. Marcus Jenkins moved in next door 6 months ago. Quiet, divorced, keeps to himself. The kind of neighbor who waves but doesn't stop to chat. James called him the photographer because of the expensive camera equipment we sometimes saw him carrying to his car on weekends. Probably shoots weddings, James had said dismissively, or works for a real estate company. How ironic those words would become. Last Friday evening, I was home alone. James was at a business dinner, his 3rd that week. The kids were at my mother's for the weekend. I'd opened a bottle of wine, drawn a bath, and was looking forward to a rare quiet night when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. But some strange instinct, the same inexplicable feeling that sometimes wakes a mother seconds before her baby cries, pulled me to the door. Marcus stood on my porch, shifting uncomfortably, a manila envelope clutched in his hands. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Tasha," he said, his voice unsteady. We weren't on first-name terms, so immediately I tensed. "But I need to show you something, and I've been debating all week whether I should." "What is it?" I asked, not inviting him in, suddenly conscious of my bathrobe and bare feet. "It's about James." He paused, his knuckles white around the envelope. "I was on assignment in Oak Ridge this week, shooting architectural photos for a magazine. That's my actual job. I'm a freelance photographer." Oak Ridge was a town about 40 minutes away, a charming historic district surrounded by newer, upscale developments. "I saw James there," Marcus continued. "But he wasn't alone, and I took some photos. Instinctively, professionally. Before I realized what I was seeing, my stomach dropped. The wine I'd enjoyed earlier turned acidic in my throat. I wouldn't be here if he was just with another woman," Marcus said, the words coming faster now. "People make mistakes. It's not my business. But this situation, it seems more complicated. And if it were me, I'd want to know." He extended the envelope, and I took it with numb fingers, still not fully comprehending what was happening. "There are digital copies," he added quietly. "I can send them to your email if you need them, for whatever you decide to do next." I must have thanked him. I must have closed the door. But all I remember is standing in my foyer, the envelope burning in my hands like a live coal. For long minutes, I couldn't open it, as if by not seeing the contents, I could preserve the life I thought I had for a few moments longer. When I finally pulled out the photos, my world imploded in absolute silence. The first showed James leaving an OB/GYN office, his arm around a young woman with golden hair. They were laughing. The second captured them in a baby boutique, James holding up tiny clothes while the woman, clearly pregnant, at least 6 or 7 months along, nodded approvingly. The third showed them kissing outside a small blue house with a for sale sign marked "sold" in bold red letters. My hands shook so violently that the photos scattered across the hardwood floor. I sank down beside them, my bathrobe pulling around me, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman couldn't be more than 25. Her pregnancy was obvious, and the tenderness in my husband's expression as he looked at her was achingly familiar. It was how he used to look at me in the early days. But it was the fourth photo that truly shattered me. James and the woman standing in front of what appeared to be a courthouse, holding what looked like marriage license papers. Her left hand sporting a ring that wasn't the family heirloom on my finger, but something new and probably expensive. "Bigamy." The word floated through my shock-numbed brain. Was that even possible? How could he legally marry her when we were still married? I grabbed my phone and called James. It went straight to voicemail, as it often did during his business dinners. "Come home now." My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, calm, cold, unrecognizable. I poured another glass of wine with shaking hands, and laid the photos out on our kitchen table, the table where we'd eaten family dinners for a decade, where the kids did their homework, where James had sat across from me just that morning, drinking coffee and checking emails as if his entire life wasn't an elaborate fiction. When headlights swept across the living room windows 2 hours later, I straightened my spine. The key turned in the lock, footsteps in the hall, Tasha, James called out. Why are all the lights on? It's almost midnight. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm when he saw my face. What's wrong? Are the kids okay? The audacity of his concern ignited something molten inside me, without a word. I pointed to the photos. James froze. The color drained from his face as his briefcase hit the floor with a thud. Tash, I can explain. He started, his voice strangled. Explain what? I asked, still in that unfamiliar, glacial tone. Explain how you have another family. Explain how the father of my children is about to be the father of someone else's. Explain how you've been living a double life while I've been here. Trusting you, loving you, building our life together. He took a step toward me, hands outstretched pleadingly. I backed away as if he were contagious. Don't touch me, I warned. Just tell me who she is. Tell me how long. Tell me if anything in our marriage has been real. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. But it was what he said next that truly broke me, words I never expected to hear, revealing a betrayal far deeper and more twisted than simple infidelity. Her name is Claire, he said quietly. And she's not just anyone, she's Zoe's best friend's older sister. The room tilted sickeningly around me. What? I whispered. I met her at Zoe's soccer tournament last year. She was there supporting her sister. She's a student teacher at the kids' school. It just happened. And then things got complicated. Complicated, I repeated numbly. Not only had he cheated, not only was he having a baby with another woman, but he had chosen someone connected to our daughter's life, someone barely older than a child. Herself, someone who worked at our children's school. How could you do this to us? I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. His answer would change everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married and reveal a secret he'd been keeping even longer than this affair. If you're as shocked as I was at this moment, like this video now and follow for part 2, where I uncover the full extent of my husband's betrayal and make a discovery about my neighbor. That turns the story in an unexpected direction, because sometimes the people closest to you are living lives you could never imagine. I've been living 2 separate lives for nearly 8 years, James said, sinking into the chair across from me. Claire isn't the first. There was someone before her, and someone before that. The kitchen wall seemed to close in around me as his confession poured out. This wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. A lifestyle. 8 years. My voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. Zoe was only 6 then. Eli was a toddler. James stared at his hands. It started after Eli was born. You were so focused on the kids, always exhausted. We stopped connecting. I felt invisible. White-hot rage flashed through me. So, while I was raising our children, you felt entitled to build other relationships because you weren't getting enough attention? It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. The first one was just supposed to be a fling. Stress relief. But then it got complicated. Complicated, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. You keep using that word. What exactly was complicated about betraying your family? He looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed. The first woman got pregnant too. I have a 7-year-old daughter in Columbus. The room spun around me, a child. Another child, born while we were married, growing up without knowing her half-siblings, without me knowing she existed. Her name is Lily, James continued, words tumbling out now as if a dam had broken. Her mother wanted me to leave you, but I couldn't. I loved you and the kids. So I set her up in an apartment, paid child support, visited when I could. When you told me you were traveling for work, I said flatly, it wasn't a question. He nodded. After a few years, she met someone else, got married. He adopted Lily. I still send money, but I don't see them anymore. My mind raced through years of memories, recalibrating everything I thought I knew. Those business trips to Columbus, the unexplained expenses, the late-night phone calls he'd take outside. And then Claire happened, I prompted, my voice hollow. Claire was different. Is different, he corrected himself, and I noticed the present tense. He wasn't giving her up. She didn't know I was married at first. By the time she found out, she was already in love with me. And then she got pregnant. So, you decided to marry her? I picked up the courthouse photo. How exactly were you planning to pull that off? Bigamy is a crime, James. He winced. It's not a legal marriage. Just a commitment ceremony. I told her I was divorced, but that the paperwork for changing my name back was taking time. She thinks my last name is Wilson. James Wilson. A simple alteration of James Williams. Just enough of a lie to create a completely separate identity. And the house? I asked, pointing to the photo with the sold sign. Investment property, he said quietly. In her name, but I paid the down payment. I laughed then. A broken sound that scared even me. With our money. with the money that should have been going to Zoe's college fund and Ellie's braces. He didn't deny it. Claire's due in 2 months, a boy, another son. A half-brother my children didn't know they had, would maybe never know. The thought of Eli having a brother out there in the world pierced through me. With fresh pain. Get out, I whispered. Get your things and get out of this house. Tasha, please, we can work through this. For the kids, don't you dare invoke our children. I stood up so abruptly that my chair crashed to the floor. You forfeited that right when you decided to father children with other women. When you spent our family's money on your secret life. When you lied to our faces every single day for 8 years. My scream echoed through the kitchen, bouncing off the subway tile backsplash I'd chosen when we remodeled the house 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when he'd already been living his double life for 5 years. James stood up slowly. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Where am I supposed to go? To your pregnant girlfriend, obviously, I spat. To the house you bought her. To your other family. The one you chose over us, day after day, lie after lie. He nodded, resignation settling over his features. I'll get some things. But Tasha, I want you to know I never stopped loving you and the kids. That part was real. I turned away, unable to look at his face anymore. Nothing about you is real. I listened to his footsteps up the stairs, to the sound of drawers opening and closing, to the zipping of luggage. 15 minutes later, he came back downstairs with a suitcase and a duffel bag. I'll call you tomorrow, he said from the doorway, about telling the kids. My head snapped up. You're not telling them anything, not yet. I need time to figure out how to protect them from this catastrophe you've created. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. The house fell silent in a way it never had before, a hollowed-out silence, as if the walls themselves were in shock. I sat motionless at the kitchen table until dawn broke, staring at the photos that had demolished everything I thought I knew about my life. When the first rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, I finally stood up on numb legs and walked to the front door. I needed to thank Marcus. Needed to understand why my reclusive neighbor had taken it upon himself to expose James's secret life. I crossed my front yard to his house and rang the bell, still in yesterday's clothes. Eyes swollen from a night without tears I'd been too shocked to cry, too numb. When Marcus opened the door, the surprise on his face quickly gave way to concern. You look like you haven't slept, he said, stepping aside. Come in. I'll make coffee. I followed him into a living room that mirrored the layout of my own house, but couldn't have been more different, where my home was filled with family photos and colorful throw pillows, and children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator. Marcus's space was sparse, meticulously organized, with framed black and white photographs on the walls. Why did you do it? I asked as he handed me a steaming mug. Why get involved in a stranger's marriage? Marcus sat across from me, his expression grave. Because 8 years ago, my wife left me for a man who was living a double life. She became the other woman without knowing it. By the time she found out the truth, she was pregnant and into deep. It destroyed her. It destroyed us. I stared at him, the mug warm between my palms. I'm sorry. He shook his head. That's not why I told you. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm trying to explain that I recognize the pattern. The way your husband always left at the same times each week. The separate phone I saw him using in the backyard once. The way he checked his watch constantly during your neighborhood barbecue last month. You were watching him, I asked, unsure whether to be grateful or disturbed. Not intentionally. But when you've lived through it, you see the signs. Marcus hesitated. And then last week, when I saw him in Oak Ridge with a pregnant woman, it confirmed everything. I couldn't just say nothing. Not when there are children involved. I nodded slowly, understanding blooming through the fog of my shock. Thank you, I think. What will you do now? He asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. Liar, obviously. Try to figure out how to tell my kids your father has been living a lie. Try not to fall apart until they come home from my mother's on Sunday. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When my wife found out about her boyfriend's real life, the other wife sent someone to take photos of them together. To gather evidence. It was humiliating for her. Devastating. If it helps at all, I wanted you to find out with dignity. With privacy. I looked up at him, seeing my neighbor this quiet, observant man in a new light. It does help. Thank you. As I walked back to my house, the weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on my shoulders. But beneath the grief and rage, a tiny spark of something else flickered: determination. I would not let James's betrayal define me or damage my children any more than it already had. Inside, I picked up my phone and called the one person who had stood by me through every crisis in my adult life, my sister Elena. I need you, I said when she answered. And I need a lawyer. What happened? Alarm colored her voice. James has been living a double life. He has another child. And another one on the way. With another woman. Saying it out loud made it real in a way the night's shock had held at bay. Elena's gasp was followed by a string of expletives. "I'm coming over right now." "Bring your laptop," I said. "I need to find out exactly what else he's been hiding." By the time Elena arrived an hour later, I had showered and changed, pulled my hair back into a severe ponytail, and started a list of everything I needed to do. Check bank accounts, change passwords, document the evidence, find a therapist for the kids, contact a divorce attorney. Elena sat up at my kitchen table, her background in financial investigation proving invaluable as we began to unravel the extent of James's deception. What we discovered went far beyond the photos Marcus had provided, revealing a web of lies so complex and calculating that it made me question every moment of the past 8 years. But the most shocking revelation was still to come, one that would link my helpful neighbor Marcus to my husband's betrayal in a way I never could have imagined. If you're as stunned by this unfolding deception as I was, like and follow now for the final part of my story, where the shocking connection between Marcus and James is revealed, and I face the ultimate decision about my family's future. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just destroy your world, it builds you a new one you never saw coming. Elena's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Tasha, I think I found something." It was nearly midnight. We had spent the day digging through financial records, uncovering hidden accounts, mysterious withdrawals, and a pattern of deception so methodical it made my stomach churn. James hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd been systematically stealing from our future. "What is it?" I leaned over her shoulder, exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "This account statement." She pointed at the screen. "It shows a recurring monthly transfer to a holding company called MJ Enterprises. $5,000 every month for the past 3 years. MJ, I repeated, my mind racing through possibilities. James's middle name is Michael. Michael James. Elena nodded. But there's something else. Look who the account is registered to. I squinted at the small print and felt the floor drop away beneath me. Marcus Jenkins, your neighbor Marcus, Elena confirmed, her voice tight. The same Marcus who conveniently showed up with those photos. I sank into a chair, trying to process this new betrayal. That doesn't make sense. Why would Marcus be receiving money from James and then expose him? Elena turned to face me, her expression grave. I think you need to ask him that question. Despite the late hour, I found myself once again crossing the small stretch of lawn separating our houses. This time, anger propelled me forward, not gratitude. Marcus answered on the third knock, wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, clearly prepared for bed. "Tasha?" His surprise seemed genuine. "Is everything okay?" "MJ Enterprises," I said without preamble. "Why has my husband been paying you $60,000 a year?" His face went absolutely still. Then, unexpectedly, relief washed over his features. "You found it," he said quietly. "Good, come in. It's time you knew everything." In his pristine living room, Marcus pulled a thick folder from a desk drawer and handed it to me. "I wasn't just a random victim of a cheating spouse," he began. "I work for an agency that specializes in infidelity investigations. When my real wife, yes, that part was true, discovered her boyfriend's double life, we hired the agency. After our divorce, I joined them." I stared at him, trying to understand. "You're a private investigator. More specialized." "I work with spouses who suspect their partners are living double lives, not just affairs, but entire secret families. It's more common than you think." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were surveillance reports, financial records, and dozens more photos of James with Claire and with other women before her. 3 months ago, a woman named Rebecca Wilson came to our agency, Marcus continued. She believed her boyfriend James was married. She had discovered his real last name was Williams, not Wilson as he claimed, and she traced him to this address. "Rebecca," I whispered. "The woman before Claire?" Marcus nodded. "Rebecca hired us to investigate. I took the case personally and moved in next door to document James's patterns. But 2 weeks into the investigation, Rebecca called it off, said she'd made a mistake, paid her final invoice and disappeared." I flipped through the file, finding a photo of a petite brunette woman. "What happened to her?" "James happened," Marcus said grimly. "We believe he discovered she was onto him and paid her off to drop the investigation. But by then, I'd already seen enough to know what kind of man your husband was. The agency pulled me off the case officially, but I stayed. Kept watching. Kept documenting." "Why?" I asked, looking up from the file. "Why invest so much time in a closed case?" Marcus hesitated. "Because 15 years ago, I was a child in this scenario. My father lived this exact same life, multiple families, elaborate lies. When it all came crashing down, nobody protected us kids. We were collateral damage. Suddenly, the transfers made sense, so the money from James Rebecca told him she'd hired an investigator but didn't give my name. He found me anyway and offered to pay me to bury the evidence I took his money and kept. Investigating, a grim smile touched his lips. I've been building a case against him while he thought he was buying my silence. That's entrapment, I said weakly. Or blackmail. No, it's justice. Marcus countered, the money is all documented. I've kept every cent in a separate account. It was never about the money, it was about gathering enough evidence to give you a fighting chance. When the truth eventually came out, which it always does, I sat back, my mind reeling. The neighbor I thought I barely knew had been methodically building a case to protect me from my own husband. Why not tell me immediately? I asked. Why wait until he was about to have another child? I needed ironclad evidence. James is careful. Smart. I couldn't risk him convincing you it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus leaned forward. And I needed to be sure you weren't involved. Involved? I repeated, incredulous. In what? Some spouses know, he said quietly. They look the other way for financial security, for social standing. I had to be sure you were a victim, not an accomplice. The suggestion that I might have known might have permitted this deception made my blood boil. But the sad reality was that Marcus was right. Some people did know. Some people did choose willful blindness. What happens now? I asked. That's up to you. The agency is prepared to testify about James's financial maneuvers. If you decide to press charges for fraud, the evidence is yours. He gestured to the folder, as is the money he paid me. It rightfully belongs to you and your children. I left Marcus's house an hour later with the folder and a cashier's check for $180. 3 years of payments that my husband had diverted from our family to cover up his deception. The next morning, I called the top divorce attorney in the state. By afternoon, James had been served with papers at Claire's house where he'd spent the night. By evening, my locks had been changed and a security system installed. Telling Zoe and Eli was the hardest part. I waited until Sunday night, after they returned from my mother's. I didn't tell them everything they didn't need to know about their half-siblings yet, or the full extent of their father's betrayal. Just that Dad had made choices that meant he couldn't live with us anymore. Is it because of his special friend? Eli asked, his small face serious. I froze. What special friend? Zoe looked down at her hands. The lady Dad visits when he goes on his secret trips. We saw a text once when he left his phone on the couch. All this time, I thought I'd been protecting them when they'd been carrying this knowledge alone. Yes, I said finally. It's because of that and other grown-up problems. But I need you both to know that none of this is your fault and that no matter what happens, you are loved. So loved. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, therapy appointments, and late nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how I could have been so blind for so long. James tried everything: tearful apologies, angry accusations, promises to change. When those failed, he resorted to threats, claiming he'd fight for custody, drag my name through the mud, leave me with nothing. But he didn't know about Marcus's evidence, about the financial trail he'd left, about the testimony from the agency. When his lawyer saw the full scope of what we had, James's fight evaporated. The divorce was finalized in record time, with terms that secured my children's future and acknowledged the years of financial deception. 3 months after Marcus knocked on my door, with those devastating photos, I stood in my backyard at sunset, watching Zoe and Eli chase fireflies across the lawn. They were healing, slowly. We all were. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, just past James and his very pregnant girlfriend. At the grocery store. He looked miserable. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction, no pain. Just peaceful indifference. Another text came through, this one from Marcus, moving back to Chicago next week. Agency has a new case for me. Just wanted to say goodbye, and that you're going to be fine. I looked across at his house, where a for sale sign had appeared yesterday. In the strangest way, I would miss my mysterious neighbor, the man who had destroyed my family and saved me in the same breath. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on my porch swing with a glass of wine and opened the small wooden box I kept hidden in my closet. Inside were my wedding ring, photos of happier times, and the remnants of a life built on lies. I'd been afraid to look at these memories, afraid they would break me all over again. But as I flipped through them, I realized something profound. The happiness in these photos wasn't fake. The love I had for my children wasn't diminished. The life I had built wasn't worthless just because part of it had been a lie. James had lived 2 lives, but I had lived one authentic, genuine, and whole. That was my strength. That would be my children's inheritance, the truth of who we were. Even when faced with deception, 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded from my lawyer. Inside was a birth announcement for James's son with Claire, alongside a handwritten note. He deserves to know his siblings someday, when you're ready. When they're ready. I placed it in the wooden box, a problem for another day. Some truths could wait. A year to the day after Marcus knocked on my door, I sold the Victorian house with all its memories and moved with my children to a sun-filled condo overlooking the city park. New school, new neighborhood, new beginning. As we unpacked boxes in our bright new kitchen, Zoe paused. A framed family photo in her hands, one of just the three of us, taken at the beach last summer. "Mom," she asked thoughtfully, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at my daughter, this perceptive, resilient young woman who had weathered a storm no child should face, and at my son, ranging his books with careful precision on his new shelves. "We already are okay," I told her, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't a reassurance or a wish. It was simply the truth. Sometimes it takes a complete stranger to show you the truth about the person sleeping beside you. Sometimes the destruction of what you thought was your family reveals the real family that was there all along. And sometimes, the photos that shatter your world are actually showing you a clearer picture of reality than you've ever seen before. If this story resonated with you, please like, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear that there is life, real, authentic life after betrayal. Comment below if you've ever had to rebuild after a devastating revelation. And remember that your worth is never defined by someone else's lies. Because the family that matters isn't always the one in the framed photos on the wall. Sometimes it's the one that remains, standing when everything else falls apart.